Reasonable Expectations version 5 tonight. That is looking at some of these major programs. It's not prediction time quite yet, but if you're a fan of these teams, what is it reasonable to expect? And I want to start with Ole Miss. Last year, Ole Miss surprised some people. We kept getting criticized because I had them much higher in the JP poll all year than the AP did. Well, we were right. They went to a New Year's Six game. So you may think, oh, he's probably a lot higher on Ole Miss this year. Maybe I am. Let me tell you what I think is reasonable. They're over under 7.5. I think 8 wins is reasonable to expect here. But I think also if they win 8 games, a lot of folks would consider that a disappointment. And it wouldn't be a disappointment. There's a lot of moving parts here. Of course, a ton of portal activity. But I think we've talked about that enough. I think everyone knows Ole Miss, man, they went out and got Jackson Dart at quarterback. Yeah, they got like 100 more kids out of the portal too. And they did a really good job, a necessarily good job at that. But behind the scenes, you know what a lot of people talk about? A lot of people in the industry talk about what the perception is of Ole Miss versus reality. Perception is Lane Kiffin, mad scientist, man, look at him running things over there so smoothly. And behind the scenes, people say, do you have any idea what that staff does over there? Do you have any idea, for instance, what losing Jeff Lebby is going to mean? I'm telling you, I'm just echoing the sentiment I get from a lot of people inside the coaching world. A lot of people inside the coaching world think Ole Miss is going to crash spectacularly this year. I don't quite think it's going to be that bad. I'm just telling you there's some folks out there who do believe that because they would tell you that wasn't Lane as much as it was some of the other guys he had around him. Well, luckily we're going to tee it up this fall and we're going to find out. I think 8-4 is reasonable. Because I look at their out of conference, and it's Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, and Tulsa. That should be 4-0 for Ole Miss. And at that point, if we're trying to get to 8 wins, what are we asking? We're asking, can you split conference play? And I think it's going to fall right in line with how many games they're favored in, being 4. And I think they'll be a dog in 4 games. And you can probably spot which ones I'm thinking about there. So you get Kentucky at home, you go to Vanderbilt, Auburn at home, you need to win those games. You go to A&M and lose. You lose against Bama at Arkansas. I can stomach that. 8 wins, considering, would be a very, very good year for Ole Miss. Michigan State is the next team I want to talk about. They went 11-2 last year. A lot is going to be expected this year and moving forward from Mel Tucker. I'm going to buck some conventional wisdom here because I think conventional wisdom would expect them to come way back to the pack. I think the national perception of Michigan State is still that last year was a lot of smoke and mirrors. I don't share in that sentiment. They're over under 7.5 wins. I'm well north of that. I'm at 9-3. I think 9-3 is reasonable to expect if you're a Spartans fan this year. Now, you have to understand, I'm saying 9-3 is reasonable because I have bought into just the fundamental shift theory up there. Not quite plate tectonics, but the fundamental shift theory is it's not smoke and mirrors. There's still work to be done. There's still roster progress that has to be made. But we've changed things here, and we're not going back. So anyone expecting us to fall back to 6-6, that's not happening. So with that, I say 9-3 as reasonable. Kenneth Walker III, I was just sitting at home the other night watching the Michigan game, and I think it was 5 touchdowns he had that day. We were there that day. Very impressive. Should have been a Heisman finalist along with Will Anderson. One of the bigger travesties in that award's not so illustrious history. He's gone. That's going to be one area of focus. And then the other area of focus is how in the world can you do any worse in the secondary than you did last year? They got ripped to pieces last year. But I did not know. I knew they faced a lot of high-profile passing attacks. I didn't know they faced 5 of the top 13 in the country. So, yeah, that'll put a dent in your pass defense. They will not remain that bad with Mel Tucker being the head coach there. That will not happen. What I think will happen this year is there'll be games where you turn it on and you say, boy, they're missing Kenneth Walker III. That's natural. What I do think, though, is I think Michigan State football this year will be one of those sum greater than the individual parts deals where they find a way to at least 9-3. I think 9-3 is the reasonable expectation. Stay in the Big Ten. Let's go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was 9-4 last year. I say 8-4 is reasonable this year. Now, Jim Leonhard, being defensive coordinator there, is the reason I start at 8-4. 8-4 is the baseline. If you're as good defensively as they are, 8 games is very reasonable. The reason I'm not going above 8 and I'm staying right at the starting point is because I don't have confidence in them offensively. I bought into the Graham Mertz hype once upon a time, the quarterback there. I got burned by it. He's still there. Feels like he's been there forever now. And I I think they just are what they are offensively. I would love to be proven wrong there. And there are a lot of games where just smash mouth football and good hard-nosed defense is going to be enough for them. That's why I didn't say 6-6. I said 8-4. But when you get down the road a little bit and you look at the fact that you've got to go to Ohio State and to Michigan State and to Iowa, to Nebraska, and also when you can't score at will, a lot of these games like, Purdue, Minnesota, all those games are in play. You should win. You'd be favored, but I'm saying they're all in play. I think it's reasonable to start at 8-4. Then if the offense does start popping and ticks up in terms of productivity a little more this year, well, then a lot of stuff's in play. Because if you can play defense like they can and you can score, you can win the division. So they may win the division at 8-4 for all I know. But 8-4 is where I am with Wisconsin in terms of reasonable expectation. What about Baylor? Baylor last year had the second to worst odds to win the Big 12. Then they won the Big 12. And so what's the follow-up here? They were 12-2 last year. What's the follow-up? Am I going to do it? Am I going to do it? Yes, I am. I think 8-4 is the reasonable default setting. Their over-under is 8. So this sounds like it's a big fallback. You got to remember who we're talking about here. This is a situation where my actual prediction for this team is going to be different than what I think reasonable expectation is. It's not reasonable after one good year to totally overhaul what the history of this program has been when you're setting expectations. That's why it's 8, even though they won 12 games or whatever it was last year. But my prediction will be well above 8 games for them because I believe Dave Aranda's the man. I mean, the guy had a returning starting quarterback and chose to name a new starter in spring, knowing that was going to cost him his quarterback. You know what they do have back, though? They've got their entire defensive front back. That's what they've got. And if you watched how Baylor evolved last year, they got Ika, the transfer there from LSU. When they got him and they plugged him in the middle, they run a 3-4 out there. When they plugged him in the middle, that was night and day. Everything else worked around him. It will this year, too. Classic situation, just like I said with Wisconsin, where you may turn on Baylor games this year, and maybe you say, I can pretty easily tell they're the second most talented team on the field here in this game that they're winning 30-20. But some greater than individual parts. I think Dave Aranda, I think he is a star, but at the very least you could call him a rising star. I think they're going to find a way to be north of this. That's why I think 8-4 is the reasonable default expectation. That's saying a lot for Baylor. This is not supposed to be a bowl program. So your preseason expectation level being at 8-4, that alone is a testament. This is not Alabama. It's Baylor. That alone is a testament to what that staff's done. The last one I wanted to hit here is one I took a fair amount of flack for last year. I wasn't alone. It's North Carolina. North Carolina, with their recruiting, why would I not expect 8-4 or better? Remember the rules here. The rules are, what is it reasonable for the fan base to expect? There were 6-7 last year. 8-4 is reasonable. And if you can't do better than that, then I need someone else running the ship. It's pretty much that simple. Their over-under is 7.5. Reminder, anything less is last season. So anything under what my expectation level is here, you essentially just revert to what they were last year. And that's not good enough. Physically, they were second best way too often. Mentally, they were a weak team last year. They were 0-6 on the road. And they played some bad teams on the road. They were 0-6 on the road last year. This year, if I'm trying to make the case for 8-4, they avoid Clemson in the regular season. They get Pitt and NC State at home. And for all the talk about losing Sam Howell, what did it matter last year? And if you've got Criswell and Drake May fighting for the job there, I mean, one of them's got to be at least a viable candidate for you to win some games. Josh Downs is still there at wide receiver. I think very quietly, they've got the potential for an excellent defensive front. Gene Chizik is the defensive coordinator here, by the way, for those that didn't follow the coaching market. Yes, Gene Chizik, a former Auburn and SEC Network fame, is now the defensive coordinator at North Carolina. 8-4. Let's get it done. 8-4 at North Carolina.